What did we study on Sunday? My wife just went, ooh, that must have been really loud. Okay, I'm sorry. What did we study on Sunday? Christine. 2 Samuel, yeah, right. Who did we study? You remember? What family? Well, Mephibosheth, right? Mephibosheth, the family of Jonathan, invited to sit at the table with David and his Zima. That doesn't sound right. That was a soft drink. What was the name of the servant that was assigned over all of Mephibosheth's family's, Saul's family's fortunes? And he had a lot of sons, and he was going to take care of. So what's that? Ziba. And so Mephibosheth came to the table. We had a lot of attributes we talked about that we applied to David, just from his example there. Can somebody give me some of those? What were some attributes we said, oh, David exemplified this potential attribute? Loyalty was the first one. That's exactly right. And displayed loyalty because he was loyal to Jonathan's family. What was another one? What's that? Humility. He said, okay, I know Mephibosheth is crippled, and I know that, in theory, he could be an enemy, considered an enemy by some, but I'm going to have him sit at my table. I'm going to treat him as family. I'm going to treat him as my friend Jonathan. I need at least one more that I'm looking for, because these are also attributes, not so much humility, but a lot of these are attributes I would say we could look at about God, right? Now, God treats us all equal, like David treated Mephibosheth. We get to sit at God's table, we mentioned. But what was the other thing about David and an attribute that I also applied to God? Do you remember that?
Faithful to his promise.
Thank you. I think, Sarah, you said love. Yes, he's very loving. I would wholly agree. We did talk about that. Faithful to his covenants, especially. You said promises. Same thing. The promises within the covenant that he made over and over and over again. God showed himself to be faithful, has shown us that he was faithful in his covenants. Whether that was to Noah, to Abraham's offspring, Isaac and Jacob, repeated to the Israelites in Exodus 24 with Moses at Mount Sinai and Deuteronomy 28, and then coming around to the New Testament, that all the nations in you will be blessed. That was Genesis 12 to Abraham. That all came true in Christ with the new covenant, especially mentioned in the Gospels, but at the Lord's Supper, 1 Corinthians 11 perhaps, where it says, the new covenant in Christ's blood. And God was faithful in that, so we know that he's faithful to us, right? We know we can count on those promises because he's shown himself to be faithful to his covenant over and over and over again. And David was the same way. He had that covenant with Jonathan. He honored that covenant. He was faithful in that. And then we ended it by saying, we don't know kind of how Mephibosheth ended the story. A little conflicting. Maybe he was loyal, maybe he wasn't. But it did seem like he thought he was being loyal, and I hope that he was, even if David wasn't convinced at the time. So today, some of those attributes are leading, or kind of the very first thing we're going to see in 2 Samuel 10. It's kind of a strange story. I think it's got some applications for today. My plan, by the way, is to go through this chapter and then maybe at least one psalm, and then maybe have a little bit of a review of the time periods. And then if we really even still have more time, we'll go through a couple of more psalms. Okay, that's kind of the overall plan. But jump in. We should have plenty of time if you have any comments to make. So 2 Samuel 10, verse 1. Now it happened afterwards. Afterwards what? After all this stuff happened with Mephibosheth. Okay, so after that time period, it happened afterwards that the king of the Ammonites died. And Hanun, his son, became king in his place. What was the name of that king who just died? It's going to say, then David said, I will show kindness to Hanun, the son of Nahash, just as his father showed kindness to me. So David sent some of his servants to console him, Hanun, concerning his father, Nahash. But when David's servants came to the land of the Ammonites, again, these are all the Ammonites we're talking about, the king of the Ammonites. When David's servants got there, the princes of the Ammonites said to Hanun, their lord, do you think that David is honoring your father because he has sent consolers to you? Has David not sent his servants to you in order to search the city, to spy it out, and to overthrow it? So Hanun took David's servants and shaved off half of their beards and cut off their garments in the middle as far as their hips and sent them away. When they told it to David, he sent to meet them, for the men were greatly humiliated. And the king said, David said, stay at Jericho until your beards grow and then return. Now the rest of the story is basically Well, what are you going to do about this? They sent a big insult to us, right? They insulted us, humiliated us, and so then they're going to go to war. And the Ammonites end up hiring, what do you call people that go work for war? Mercenaries. Basically hire mercenaries, and they were mostly from the Arameans, okay? They're mostly Arameans. Hire these mercenaries that all start bringing chariots and men and everything else to this war on behalf of the Ammonites. But with David's general, Joab, and Joab's brother, Abishai, they split up the men in a certain way. They basically have a battle on two fronts, and they're successful. And if you look at the end of it, verse 19, it says, let's look at 18. But the Arameans, that was the, we just said, what is that word? Yeah, the mercenaries, fled, told you it was Wednesday, it's late. But the Arameans fled before Israel, and David killed 700 charioteers of the Arameans and 40,000 horsemen, and struck down Shobach, the commander of their army, and he died there, Shobach did. When all the kings, servants of Hadadezer, saw that they were defeated by Israel, they made peace with Israel and served them. So the Arameans feared to help the sons of Ammon anymore. All right? I would be too, right? We came in, the Ammonites, pretty strong. We're going to talk about them. We've met them before in our study here. And they disrespect David and his people and go to war hiring all these people and are soundly defeated, and it settles some things as far as the Arameans were concerned. So let's look at this a little more carefully. There's a few things I want to pull out. One verse I'm going to pull out. I'm just going to pull it kind of out of context because I love what it says. I don't have a lot of story behind it necessarily. But one of the things that the general said that Joab said when he was talking to his brother and arraying the men, he said in verse 12, "Be strong and let us show ourselves courageous for the sake of our people and for the cities of our God, and may the Lord do what is good in his sight." I just think that's a great statement of trust, faithfulness, of reliance on God, and to say, okay, we godly men, we godly people, we're going to do what we need to do. And God will take care of the rest, right? And I think at the end of the day, that's pretty much our application that we have a lot of the times is, you know what? We need to do what we need to do, and at the end of the day, the result's really up to God, okay? And I think that's one lesson we can take out of this. Now, back to the story, though, because some of this really kind of cracks me up. David, in verse 2, said, "I will show kindness to Hanun, the son of Nahash, just as his father showed kindness to me." The man's father, the king, had just died, and David sends an envoy of some kind to go comfort them, show a little bit of a tribute to them, to go honor them, because David is a kind guy. We just said that. David is a loyal person. What is he? "I'll show kindness to Hanun, just as his father showed kindness to me." That's that same trait of David's, loyalty, in my opinion, right? Do we know where that kindness was shown? Let's look at some stuff about Nahash real quickly. By the way, almost all of this is repeated verbatim in 1 Chronicles 19. Unlike a lot of the overlap with 1 Chronicles and 2 Kings, a lot of times there's some things that are in one that aren't on the other. Basically, it's almost a Xerox copy, so we're not going to go through all the 1 Chronicles, but if you want to look at 1 Chronicles 19 later on, you can. But turn over with me to 1 Samuel 11. 1 Samuel 11, so we can refresh our memory a little bit. 1 Samuel 10 is basically where Samuel anoints Saul as the new king. Okay, 1 Samuel 10, he anoints Saul as the new king. Saul's got a couple of tasks. You might remember he ends up sort of being around some prophets and maybe having a moment of being a prophet and having a big learning curve where he matures pretty quickly. And it says, like verse 11 of chapter 10, "It came about when all who knew him previously saw that he prophesied now with the prophets, that the people said to one another, 'What has happened to the son of Kish? Is Saul among the prophets?'" You remember that story? I hope you do. Ben spent a good amount of time on it. And Samuel basically said, okay, You go do your thing for a little while, and in a week, we're going to get back together, and we're going to sacrifice to God. We're going to make sacrifice to God. I'll see you in a week, all right? Well, parallel to that week, in my opinion, parallel to that week, in chapter 11, now Nahash, the Ammonite, this verse 1, came up. Nahash. Does that sound familiar? That's who we're talking about. The father of Hanun was Nahash. Here we have Nahash. Nahash the Ammonite came up and besieged Jabesh Gilead, and all of the men of Jabesh said to Nahash, "Make a covenant with us, and we will serve you." But Nahash the Ammonite said to them, "I will make it with you on this condition, that I will gouge out the right eye of every one of you. Thus I will make it a reproach on all Israel." Are these guys known for humiliating people? Right? It seems like that. This just awful thing that he's going to do. He basically said, "Okay, I'll make a covenant. You can give up if you want to. We'll have peace. But we're going to gouge out all your right eyes." Does that sound fair? So obviously they're terrified. Verse 3 is the elders said to him, "Let us alone for 7 days, that we may send messengers throughout the territory of Israel. Then if no one is there to deliver us, we will come out to you to have our eyes gouged out," basically. Well, this, in fact, verse 5, "Behold, Saul was coming up from the field behind the oxen." He's just out working the field. He's the newly anointed king. Unlike a lot of kings later on, unlike a lot of our politicians that make a career out of it, Saul is basically still out there working. He's doing things as a regular guy, even though he's king. He hears about this, and that's when he becomes extremely kind of enraged, sins for everyone, and they go conquer them, right? During this week, instead of meeting them out there at the end of the week, they go conquer the Ammonites, scatter them, and then they come back and they have these sacrifices to God and this celebration, sort of seemingly at the same time that Samuel was planning on doing that anyway. It all took place about that same time. Very, very early in Saul's, career, you say, as a king. Does that make sense? That's who we're talking about. What was David at this time? Nothing, as far as I know. Maybe a kid, right? Maybe was a shepherd out somewhere. I don't remember how long Saul served before David as a young man was anointed. I probably could look that up, I guess. I don't know off the top of my head, but David's not even mentioned here yet. So was there any kindness shown to David here? Not that I could see. But is it pretty clear that Nahash and Saul are enemies? Yes. Pretty clear. Were David and Saul ever enemies? Yes, they were enemies. Remember all the hiding? Remember the cave video we saw? All the stronghold that David and his men hid in with Saul. Maybe Nahash put him up at some point. Maybe he hit him at some time. Maybe he did defend him in some way. As far as I can tell, I'm looking over at Joe just to make sure Joe's like, "Oh no, Matt, you're forgetting something." As far as I can tell, there's no other mention of Nahash or any relationship whatever to David. But who remembered? Whatever it was, David. David remembered. Whatever kindness Nahash did for him, David remembered. So then Hanun, listening to his servants, let's see here. The princes, not the servants, the princes of the Ammonites, verse 3, said to Hanun, their lord, "Do you think that David is honoring your father because he has sent consolers to you? Has David not sent his servants to you in order to search the city, to spy it out, and to overthrow it?" So then Hanun severely humiliated these men publicly based off these assumptions. Can you think of another example in the Bible? We haven't gotten there yet. It's coming up pretty soon, of a very similar example where a king whose father has recently died is advised by his trusted friends on how to handle the people. Remember who it was? Rehoboam. Rehoboam is whose son? Solomon's son. Okay? So Solomon's dead, Rehoboam is king, and the people say, "Can you give us some relief? We have been working so hard for Solomon." Remember, Solomon expanded the borders, he built the temple, he did all these things, construction nonstop, and the people said, "Look, can we have some relief?" And Rehoboam basically says, "Solomon, my dad, his thigh is like my pinky." I think he says pinky. "And he corrected you with whips. I'm going to correct you with scorpions, something like that. So he listens to his friends, the new king. Dad died. I've been set up as king. I'm listening to my friends. You see the similarities there in some ways? Can you think of any applications today where people, I don't know, kind of act this way? It's a big, broad statement. Can you think of any examples? No? Nothing? Nope, nobody ever acts that way anymore. You ever have people you've heard of, even in recent news, hear about something or someone, all they're listening to is their core group, and they've got no idea how to even judge this? We just talked about David last week. Was there any reason to believe that David was spiteful and hateful and treacherous and deceitful? No, he was loving and he was loyal and he was honest. And yet, in a certain group, all they know is that he's hateful and he's spiteful and he's spying on us. And, you know, one of my terms that I have been fixated on lately is this idea of a echo chamber. You heard that lately? You listen to one news station and you listen to one peer group of friends and you listen to AI, you just heard me the other day, I like AI, just fine. But if you engage with AI, you know what it does in order to get you to come back? It rewards you by feeling good. It tells you that the way you're thinking is pretty much right. And now that everything is controlled by AI, when you go search something on Google, it's going to reinforce what you kind of already think most of the time. Because that's how it gets clicks. When you watch one station on TV, it's going to get clicks because you're going to come back because they're going to reinforce what you think, this echo chamber. Can you kind of see what happens here? And can you see it in today's world where, you know how people often react to that? Humiliating, awful comments, caustic things, assumptions designed to just emotionally hurt others. I feel like when I see that, I kind of think that this has been going on since the days of David. I'm only listening to people that I want to listen to. Since Rehoboam, I'm only going to listen to the people that I'm listening. Rehoboam actually had some wise people tell him to lessen the burden, right? Some folks that knew, cautioned him to do it one way, and he said, I'm not listening to them, I'm going to listen to the people, my people. So, it is interesting that many of the things that we see in today's world, I think happen here too. And they shave off half their beards. I'm assuming that means this way, not this way, right? Right? Because he says we're going to let it grow out. It could mean this way. I don't have any idea. That would also be embarrassing. They were cut off their garments in the middle as far as their hips. So what are they? They're basically sending these guys packing half naked, right? Where they are now exposing themselves as they leave the city and as they go all the way home, humiliated to the point that David has to then recognize this. Does that make is there any common sense in that at all? I don't think so. I don't think there is. It's all based on this strange set of assumptions they have that when people show up to say nice things to you, you assume they're up to no good. Do we do that sometimes? I've got to tell you, at my office, I'm pretty skeptical. I don't really like it. All right, I'll tell you, this is me, and I hate to say it. I don't necessarily like it when somebody says, oh, you know, I'm a Christian, I work for this church. I heard you're a Christian, you want to do business together, right? I'm always kind of like, oh, man, if all you can trade on is the fact that we're both Christians, I'd really like to hear that you did a good job roofing first, right? But it is strange. I'm very skeptical. And they went beyond skeptical. I can't tell you that I've ever had a roofer come do that, and I sent him off half naked and beardless, right? I haven't done that. I might say, look, send me some references, but that's about as awful as I might get. Okay, I want to go to a psalm that might kind of address this a little bit. But do you have anything about this? I know it's kind of an odd chapter, but anything that you want to comment on? Joe.
He kind of process this through a little bit. You know, some comments you made, I think, are really good about, really and truly, we can just get tunnel vision. You listen to all the same input all the time. We draw certain opinions. They may or may not be right, you know, depending on the input we're getting. And so I'm thinking about David here. And he had a friend named Jonathan. And Jonathan, he trusted completely. But he had a reason to trust Jonathan because
He's saying that you could have, it was easier for David to have trust in Jonathan, for example, because Jonathan proved himself. He proved that he was faithful to God. And I don't know that you said this exactly, but he also proved himself to David through actions, not just with words or a tribute, right? Yeah, exactly right. And so clearly these instincts that they have are normal instincts. They're protective instincts. They're probably not bad. But they've also clearly judged David wrong instead of taking a wait-and-see attitude. Yes?
I think like the example of Rehoboam and also this chapter here is a reminder of the importance of recognizing what information you're taking in and still trying to search out wisdom and what the actual right thing to do should be.
Yeah, I agree. Rehoboam, or this example, there's wisdom in searching out more information, more people, a wider vision from which to collect your information and before you start making decisions. Yeah, exactly right. I agree. There may be also an example of the idea that, kings, the one that is then coming second, sons aren't, it's hard to be the same, right? Everybody has different strengths, different weaknesses, but someone who might have been a strong king, that's not passed on through DNA, right? Someone can have a strong business mind, and then their children might be good at something else entirely, but often we sort of want to leave that to the next in line, but it doesn't mean they're necessarily cut out for that. I think that's another little human trait we could probably put in here. Anything else before we go to Psalm 19? I got plenty of time, so I'm not trying to cut anybody off. You got anything? Okay, let's turn over to Psalm 19 and just see something. We don't have a lot of Psalms. In fact, okay, I want to make sure, we're going to come back to this slide. See down at the bottom, we have plenty of Psalms we can go through. This was on one of Ben's last slides of as they were expanding the kingdom, likely these were Psalms that David wrote on that way up. You remember, we got to this little bit of a breaking point here of a time of success, and we're going to go up over that hill and start declining in the next chapter with the sin of Bathsheba. But, so that was Mephibosheth. And a couple of things here. So he defeats the Ammonites. The Ammonites were descendants of Lot. So historically, way back in Deuteronomy, God basically said they're off the table. You don't need to be going to war with them. They were descendants of Lot. They're basically your relatives. Don't go to war with them. Well, now time has gone by. Time has passed considerably. And at one time in Judges, they were very big, and they were sort of the ruling, much more powerful than Israel, and clearly that has changed. And then I wanted to show you the kingdoms real quick. Let's see. Saul, I think, is on the left, and I'm not looking at that right. Oh, that was probably, okay, it's tiny on the left, bigger on the right, and then the next slide, I think, shows how much larger the kingdom has come under David. The right-hand side, you see how much it's expanded, right? So it looks smaller, but it's a lot larger kingdom. And so that's about what we're talking about now in 2 Samuel here, 11, 12 area. Okay, so we're going to go back over here to some of these Psalms in a second, but I did want you to at least see that because Joe puts a lot of effort into these slides, and I think they're really useful. All right, so Psalm 19, the book of Psalms, Psalm 19. I think this might be a familiar psalm to you. It's not one on this list, but I wanted to kind of explore it with you a little bit. The Psalm of David. The heavens are telling of the glory of God, and their expanse is declaring the work of his hands. Day to day pours forth speech, and night to night reveals knowledge. There is no speech, nor are there words. Their voice is not heard. Their line has gone out through all the earth, and their utterances to the end of the world. In them he has placed a tent for the sun, which is a bridegroom coming out of his chamber. It rejoices as a strong man to run his course. Its rising is from one end of the heavens, and its circuit to the other end of them, and there is nothing hidden from its heat. So he's basically just extolling God, is praising God for the power that he has. It's seen in nature, seen in the creation of the earth and the heavens. And then verse 7, one of the very familiar verses to all of us because of our songs. The law of the Lord is perfect, restoring the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. The precepts of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart. The commandment of the Lord is pure, enlightening the eyes. The fear of the Lord is clean, enduring forever. The judgments of the Lord are true. They are righteous altogether. They are more desirable than gold, yea, than much fine gold. Sweeter also than honey and the drippings of the honeycomb. Moreover, by them your servant is warned. In keeping them, there is great reward. And I want to stop there for a second and come to this next part separately. So if you get trapped in a echo chamber of sorts, you have one perspective being vomited out to you nonstop by whatever core group you are participating with very little insight to anything else necessarily. What is David saying here is the reliable foundation that you can always come back to? God's word, right? God's word does not change. Frankly, the people that espouse God's word change all the time, right? Good, bad, good example, bad example, whatever that might be. Please don't ever try to be faithful to I'm not saying this right. Don't be totally reliant on the people of the church in Taylor's, okay? Be reliant on God and God's word. I will fail you. Joe could fail you. Ben could fail you. Anyone here can fail you. We're all fallible people, right? As is everyone else in the world. But you can always come back to the Bible. And what does it say? Verse 9, the fear of the Lord is clean, enduring forever. The judgments of the Lord are true. They are righteous altogether. That's what's desirable, right? That's your foundation. Now, here's a little tie-in that I thought was maybe interesting. Let's see. Verse 12. Who can discern his errors? Who can discern his own errors? Acquit me of hidden faults. Also keep back your servant from presumptuous sins. Let them not rule over me. Then I will be blameless, and I shall be acquitted of great transgression. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. Does your Bible say presumptuous sins? What does yours say? I can't hear you. Willful. Okay, great. So one definition in theory of presumptuous are assumed. They are going to happen. They are presumed to be true. But presumptuous isn't the same as factual. Presumptuous, a little bit like assumptuous, it's not exactly the same. There's an assumed amount of error. We presume it is true, but it is not necessarily true. And I tend to think that the reason why so many translations don't necessarily say willful is because that word's not quite that. It's really potentially saying, forgive me of these sins of the things that I am doing, thinking I am right, or thinking I should, even if I'm wrong, okay? There's always this potential that I'm listening to my friends and they just told me to shave these guys' beards and send them off half naked, right? They made a bad assumption. They presumed that David was there. They assumed that the presumption was David was there and up to no good. And so I think it's interesting that David even prays to God to be protected from such things. And let the words of my mouth, the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. When in doubt, please let what I'm thinking, let what I'm saying, the implication, let how I'm acting those things out be acceptable to you based on this, right? Not based on what people think, not based on what my friends tell me, based on the Bible, all right? Which I think the Ammonites would have been well served for. Did I see a hand go up over there? No? Okay. Isabel, I thought we'd get through at least one more psalm. I want to go through a little bit of time period stuff as a way of review. Remember, today's supposed to be a review, and I didn't review it all. Does anybody else have anything to say about this psalm or about what we talked about in 2 Samuel 10? Otherwise, you're going to be doing 17 time periods. So just saying. Okay. So out of the 17 time periods, what's first? Before the flood, scattering of the people. What was the fourth? What's after scattering the people? Patriarchs. Good. What's number 5? After patriarchs, we have Exodus from Egypt, right? Joseph was the last patriarch, so to speak, of that time in that period. Exodus from Egypt, wandering in the wilderness, invasion and conquest of the land. Then what? Judges. Thank you. We covered Judges, and now we are into United Kingdom, soon to be divided kingdom, starting with Rehoboam, and then Judah alone, okay? And then captivity, return from captivity, years of silence, life of Christ, early church, and letters to Christians, okay? That is what your kids are all hopefully learning in all the kids' classes, because that's what the whole Bible story, how it can be summarized, start to finish. And then you start breaking it down. So in the first 10 chapters are so easy before the flood, because it's just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, okay? I'm probably doing that wrong. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You've got, with before the flood, you have creation, Adam and Eve, first sin, Cain and Abel, and then generations. 6, 7, and 8 is all the flood, with 9 being very special, a lot of communication to Noah. So the flood itself is 6, 7, and 8. 9, what special things happen in chapter 9? Can you remember? What was that? Okay, you got some covenant. You got covenant of the rainbow, was toward the end of chapter 9. Any other things you can remember? We have some special instructions now. Everybody were vegetarians before that. What now? Meat is now given for food. We have a curse on Canaan, and then eventually in chapter 10 we have more generations. Scattering the people, chapter 11. What does that even mean? Tower of Babel is built, the languages are confused, people are scattered, more generations. And then we have, after scattering the people, patriarchs. Who was the first one? Abraham. What chapter was a covenant given to Abraham? Genesis what? 12. Then we had Isaac repeated, Jacob repeated, and then a couple of chapters spent on Esau, and then the stories of Joseph. At the end of that time period of Joseph, Joseph has died, the people have multiplied, and then they're all slaves, and Egypt has forgotten all about Joseph, and that's when we have the life of Moses beginning. Okay, I'm not going to go through all of the Moses things because there's about 10 of them or 12 of them or more, and hopefully, though, your kids have learned those or learned them last quarter. So then going into invasion and conquest of the land, wandering in the wilderness, Mount Sinai was part of that. What happened at Mount Sinai? Giving of the law, exactly right. We have the covenant is renewed, it's broken, and then renewed again, okay? Chapter 24, if I'm saying that right, was when Moses gave that covenant to all the people, sprinkled all the blood all over them, but giving of the law, including 10 commandments. All right, who's going to do 10 commandments? There's 10. The first 4 all have to do with God. What was the first one? Jerry, you know it. Judy, first commandment. Don't have any other God before me. Don't have any idols, no graven images. Don't use the Lord's name in vain. Honor the Sabbath, the 2 do's here. Honor the Sabbath, honor your father and mother. Okay, and then it jumps to a whole bunch of don'ts. Don't murder, don't commit adultery, don't steal, don't lie, and don't covet. Okay? So if you're teachers, it's just 10. It's pretty easy to do. Have your kids go through it. And I do it that way, just so you know. Just do this, don't do that. You don't have to make them all real fancy because they're not going to remember all, like, don't cover your neighbor's wife or anything that your neighbor has. And I mean, it gets pretty long. You're not supposed to covet anything. And lie, it said don't bear false witness. I just say lie. That's what it's talking about. Okay. So then that gets us, we also get instructions for building the tabernacle, and then they actually build the tabernacle. They get other instructions as well. And then spies are sent into the land, and Israel refuses to go in. All right. So anyway, that if you can use that cyclical Bible study, the three cycle Bible study, that will help your kids as you go along through the whole Bible for this next couple of years. Thank you.